She walked into the heart of a financial empire, her linen shirt a quiet offense against its gleaming armor of wealth. The sneering panel saw a janitor, a fraud who had stumbled into the wrong world. They shredded her sterling resume without a glance, their laughter sharp as shattered glass. "You're no leader," one declared. "Go fetch coffee." Humiliated but unbroken, Serafina Vance stood firm, her calm gaze holding a secret that would soon bring their gilded world to its knees. The headquarters of Apex Global Holdings was not a building, it was a declaration. It pierced the Manhattan skyline, a monument of steel and glass that drank the sun and reflected an image of absolute power. Its lobby was a cathedral built to the god of capital. Floors of polished Italian marble stretched into the distance, mirroring a chandelier that dripped crystal like frozen tears, each one the size of a fist. The air was thick with the scent of expensive leather, and a silence that was heavier than noise, the kind of silence that costs millions to maintain. This was a world where status was the only recognized currency, and appearance was the non-negotiable price of entry. Could you do me a favor? Grab your phone, give this video a like, drop a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button. It means the world to keep sharing stories like this, stories that remind us we're not alone. All right, let's keep going. Into this temple of elitism stepped Serafina Vance. At 39, she was a study in deliberate understatement. Her white linen shirt was crisp, but unadorned. Her cream trousers were tailored to perfection, yet simple. Her flat leather shoes made no sound on the marble, a stark contrast to the sharp, assertive clicks of the stilettos that usually graced this floor. Her dark hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, and her face was free of makeup, save for a hint of lip balm. She was striking not for what she wore, but for the quiet confidence with which she wore it. Her hazel eyes held a unique duality, the warmth of a summer evening and the hard glint of forged steel. In her canvas tote bag, alongside a simple notebook and pen, was a worn, dog-eared copy of The Wealth of Nations. This detail alone was enough to earn her the receptionist's scorn. The young woman, whose name tag read Kiera, smirked from behind her fortress of a desk. "Interview candidates use the side entrance," she said, her voice dripping with condescension as she pointed towards a sterile, unmarked door. Serafina simply nodded and followed the direction, ignoring the whispers that rippled through the lobby in her wake. The men in their bespoke suits and the women in their sharp-shouldered blazers saw her as an anomaly, an error in the building's otherwise perfect algorithm of wealth. They did not see the double MBA from Oxford and MIT. They did not see the 15 years she had spent architecting trillion-dollar strategies for investment funds in Zurich, Singapore, and Boston. And they certainly did not see the chairwoman of the board, who had returned anonymously to stress test the very system of meritocracy she had designed a decade prior. In the stark white hallway reserved for supplicants, the air grew thick with arrogance. The other candidates for the global strategy vice president role were preening, their designer suits acting as armor, and their expensive watches as weapons. They circled Serafina like wolves, sizing up a lamb. A woman named Brielle Astor, her skirt a recognizable slash of Gucci plaid, pointed at Serafina's tote. "Is that her briefcase or a grocery bag?" She laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. The ringleader was Corbin Dane, a man whose smug confidence announced that he was the pre-selected heir to the position. He tossed a crumpled dollar bill at Serafina's feet. "For your dry cleaning," he sneered, eliciting a chorus of chuckles. Another candidate snapped a photo, his fingers flying across his phone as he posted it to a private group chat labeled Apex Wannabes, with the caption, "Number budget candidate. Should have taken the service elevator." The hallway echoed with their laughter, a cruel symphony of privilege. Kiera, the receptionist, watched from a distance, a smirk playing on her lips, doing nothing to intervene. Serafina's fingers tightened on the strap of her tote bag. She felt the sting of their derision, a familiar pain she had witnessed inflicted on others for years. But her spine remained straight, her posture a silent act of defiance. Her dignity was a fortress they could not breach, for they had no idea they were throwing stones at the very foundation of the castle they so desperately wanted to enter. The interview room was a glass box overlooking the city, designed to make a candidate feel small against the backdrop of Apex's dominion. Seated at a long obsidian table were the three arbiters of her fate, or so they believed. Roderick Thorne, the director of human resources, was a barrel-chested man whose $5,000 suit seemed a size too tight, straining against his self-importance. Beside him sat Isolde Finch, a senior manager whose severe black blazer and stark red lipstick made her look like a predatory bird. Finally, there was Marcus Bellwether, director of operations, a man whose only notable feature was the incessant, distracting glint of his gold cufflinks as he shuffled papers he had no intention of reading. Their eyes performed a collective autopsy on Serafina's attire, and their smiles were thin, predatory slits. "Are you the actual candidate?" Roderick Thorne began, leaning back so his chair groaned in protest. "My apologies. I thought you were here to deliver the coffee." Isolde Finch smirked, adding, "No one told you Apex has a standard? This isn't a weekend brunch, dear." The air thickened, their judgment a palpable force. Serafina placed her tote on the floor beside her chair. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and measured, a quiet stream flowing through a hostile landscape. "My resume is in the file before you. I believe it addresses any questions about my qualifications. Shall we begin?" Thorne snorted, pushing her file aside with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "We'll get to that." The questions that followed were not designed to gauge her intellect, but to disorient and dismiss her. They were superficial, laced with corporate jargon, and delivered with an impatient, condescending rhythm. When Serafina attempted to answer a question from Isolde about high-stakes mergers by detailing her lead role in a $50 billion deal in Singapore, Marcus Bellwether cut her off with a wave of his hand. "That's enough," he said, smirking. "Sounds like assistant-level work. We're looking for leaders here." The true performance began then. Bellwether flicked on a projector. An image flashed onto the wall behind Serafina, a stock photo of a woman in a linen shirt almost identical to hers, with a large, brutal red X superimposed over it. Underneath, bold letters read, "Candidate attire, what not to do." The room filled with the panel's derisive laughter. "This is you," Bellwether said, pointing at the screen. As Serafina tried to maintain her composure and continue her answer, Thorne interrupted again, his voice booming. "Speak up! We can't hear you over the sound of that outfit." Then came the final, blatant act of sabotage. Isolde Finch slid a 5-page financial analysis test across the table. It was a chaotic mess of contradictory models and flawed data sets, an impossible puzzle. "This one's due in 3 minutes," she said, her red lips curving into a triumphant smile. The panel leaned back, tapping their pens on the table in a mocking rhythm. Through the glass wall, Serafina could see Corbin Dane peek in, giving Roderick Thorne a subtle wink. The fix was in. The spectacle was meant to break her. Serafina picked up the pen. Her fingers did not tremble. She scanned the nonsensical pages, her hazel eyes narrowing, not in confusion, but in analysis. She recognized the trap for what it was, not a test of skill, but a test of fortitude. A fresh wave of pain and anger washed over her, not for herself, but for every qualified candidate who had been broken in a room just like this one. She felt the weight of their silent screams, their crushed hopes. But on the surface, her composure was a placid lake. She began to write, her pen moving with a steady, deliberate grace. The slide was screenshotted and posted to the Apex Elite Slack channel with the caption, "Number dressed to fail." The post was a public crucifixion, and each digital like was another nail. Yet in the room, the woman they thought they were crucifying was calmly documenting their every sin. "Time's up," Isolde Finch declared, snatching the papers from Serafina's hand before she could finish the final sentence. She gave the test a cursory, contemptuous glance. "As expected, you're not a fit for our leadership culture. Wrong attire, no presence, and frankly, you bombed the test." Her voice was final, a gavel striking down on a verdict that had been decided before the trial even began. Before Serafina could utter a word, the door swung open. Corbin Dane strode in, his pinstriped suit gleaming under the recessed lighting as if it were polished armor. His entrance was perfectly timed, a piece of corporate theater. He winked at Isolde, who offered him a conspiratorial smile and slid his pristine file to the top of the pile. "Now, this is leadership material," she announced loudly, ensuring Serafina heard every word. The panel erupted in convivial laughter. Roderick Thorne clapped Corbin on the shoulder. "You're our guy," he said, completely ignoring Serafina, who now stood beside the table, a ghost in their triumphant narrative. The room's hierarchy was brutally clear. Money and flash had vanquished merit. The entire interview had been a sham, a cruel formality to justify a decision already bought and paid for by a $200,000 donation to Thorne's private fund. Serafina picked up her canvas tote. The room fell silent for a moment, expecting her to leave in shame. Instead, she tilted her head, and her voice, though low, cut through the smug atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. I don't know of any candidate so exceptional that a panel would overlook all standards, from experience to ethics. She paused, her hazel eyes moving from Thorne to Finch to Bellwether. But if an envelope is enough to sway a decision, then today's test is no longer about aptitude. It's about complicity. The room froze. The air crackled with sudden, sharp tension. Roderick Thorne's face, already florid, deepened to a furious crimson. He slammed a meaty fist on the obsidian table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Are you insinuating we accept bribes?" he roared, rising from his chair. "Do you have any idea who you are speaking to? This is a leading financial conglomerate, not a marketplace for cheap accusations." Isolde's smirk vanished, her pen clattering onto the table. Marcus leaned forward, his voice turning icy. "You've got some nerve. No wonder you're dressed like a nobody. You have no class." Through the glass, the other candidates peered in, whispering amongst themselves. "She's done for," someone murmured. But Serafina didn't flinch. She met Roderick Thorne's furious gaze, her own eyes steady and unblinking. Her voice was slow, even, and carried a weight that none of them could comprehend. "I know exactly who I am speaking to," she said, "and more clearly still, who does not deserve a seat at this table." The silence that followed was deafening. The panel's confidence began to crack, their eyes darting nervously between each other. Their power was built on a foundation of intimidation, and for the first time, their target was not intimidated. They had misjudged her completely. They saw a meek victim, but they were facing a judge. Their world, so carefully constructed from bespoke suits and backroom deals, was balanced on the edge of a precipice, and they had just invited the reckoning to give it a final push. As Serafina's words hung in the air like a death sentence, the panel scrambled to regain control, resorting to their basest instincts: mockery. "She's probably some disgruntled clerk fishing for a lawsuit," Isolde whispered to Marcus, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Look at her. I bet she typed her resume at a public library." The dam of tension broke, and they flooded the room with cruel laughter. Corbin Dane joined in, giving Serafina a mock salute. "Better luck at the temp agency," he sneered, high-fiving Marcus. Just then, the main doors to the conference suite swung open with a silent, commanding sweep. Alistair Croft, the CEO of Apex Global Holdings, strode in. At 50, he was a legend in the financial world, a man whose reputation for fairness was as fearsome as his intellect. He possessed a sharp jaw, silver-flecked hair, and piercing blue eyes that could freeze a hostile boardroom with a single glance. He had built Apex from a boutique firm into a global powerhouse, and his presence instantly sucked the air out of the room. He didn't spare the panel a glance. His steps were deliberate, measured, as he walked not towards the head of the table, but directly towards Serafina. Behind him followed a young man in a navy suit, Lucas, his personal assistant. The panel's smirks evaporated, replaced by confusion, then a dawning, sickening dread. Alistair Croft stopped a respectful distance from Serafina. The entire building seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a gesture that shattered the reality of everyone present, he inclined his head in a slight, formal bow. His voice was low and resonant, filled with a deference that was utterly alien in this environment. "Madam Chairwoman," he said, "I apologize for keeping you waiting." The room became a tomb. Roderick Thorne's face went ashen, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Isolde's heels trembled on the marble floor, her red lipstick a stark wound against her bloodless skin. Marcus Bellwether's hands shook so violently that his cufflinks clinked together, a frantic, tinny sound in the profound silence. On the projector screen, the mocking image of the linen shirt with the red X still glowed, a monument to their catastrophic misjudgment. Slowly, Serafina unbuttoned the simple cream coat she wore over her shirt. Pinned discreetly to the linen was a small, elegant gold-plated badge. It was understated, but radiated an authority that dwarfed every Rolex and designer label in the building. The inscription was simple: Chairwoman of the Board, Serafina Vance. She turned to face the terrified panel. her hazel eyes no longer warm, but as cold and clear as ice. "I didn't come here to apply for a job," she said, her voice cutting through the silence with chilling precision. "I came to assess whether the recruitment system I built a decade ago, a system founded on fairness and merit, still functions." She paused, her gaze locking onto Thorne, then Finch, then Bellwether, and finally, the paralyzed Corbin Dane. "The answer," she concluded, "is no." The word chairwoman echoed in the silence, each syllable a hammer blow dismantling their careers, their reputations, and their arrogant world. Their terror was a tangible thing, a cold fog filling the room as they finally understood. They hadn't been interviewing a candidate, they had been judged by their queen. The panel's collapse was instantaneous and absolute. Chairwoman Roderick Thorne stammered, his booming voice reduced to a pathetic squeak. This is a mistake. A misunderstanding. "No one told us," Isolde whispered, clutching the edge of the table as if to keep from fainting. Serafina ignored their pleas. She reached into her canvas tote, the same bag Brielle Astor had mocked as a grocery bag, and retrieved a sleek, modern tablet. With a tap of her finger, the projector screen behind her flickered, replacing the image of the crossed-out shirt with a live feed of the Apex Elite's Slack channel. The room watched in horrified silence as their own words condemned them. Number, budget candidate. Number, dressed to fail. The coffee lady crashes. Every cruel joke, every sneering comment, was displayed for Alistair Croft and the terrified candidates in the hallway to see. "You didn't just bend the rules," Serafina said, her voice calm but lethal, pinning each of them with her gaze. "You built a culture of corruption and celebrated cruelty as a corporate value." The candidates in the hallway gasped, their phones dropping from their hands. Lucas, Alistair's assistant, projected an image of Serafina's badge onto the wall for all to see. The title, Chairwoman of the Board, glowed like a verdict. Alistair Croft's blue eyes darkened, his expression hardening into one of cold fury. "You're done," he said to the panel, his voice a low growl that promised swift and merciless consequences. Their careers evaporated in that moment, but Serafina wasn't finished. She pulled a manila folder from her tote and slid it across the table to Alistair. "This is the evidence of payments made to secure positions, including Mr. Dane's." The folder contained everything. Copies of bank transfers from Corbin's father into Roderick Thorne's offshore fund, time-stamped emails from Isolde promising Corbin the role, and internal memos signed by Marcus Bellwether that fast-tracked his application, while dismissing others with far superior qualifications. It was a meticulous, undeniable indictment. Effective immediately, Alistair announced, his voice like steel. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Finch, Mr. Bellwether, and Mr. Dane are suspended pending a full investigation, which I suspect will be very short. Security will escort you from the premises." The security guard who had earlier smirked at Serafina now stood pale and trembling, his radio silent as Lucas gestured for him to be removed as well. The fallout was seismic and immediate. As the disgraced panel was led away, their arrogance replaced by the slack-jawed shock of the condemned, Lucas turned his attention to the hallway. He streamed the full, unedited footage of the interview and the subsequent bullying to Apex's entire internal network. The public shaming was brutal. Brielle Astor's Gucci skirt seemed to wilt as her own face, twisted in mockery, flashed on the screens around her. She turned crimson as colleagues she had known for years turned to whisper, "That's her." Corbin's dollar toss was replayed in slow motion. The Apex Wannabes chat was exposed, shaming its 200 members. The candidate who had posted the photo of Serafina tried to flee, but security now blocked the doors. Serafina stood at the center of the room, her tote bag resting on the table where her resume had been torn. She addressed the now silent crowd of tormentors. "You judged me by my shirt, not by my skills. Now the world sees your character." The footage was leaked to the press. Within an hour, it had 5 million views on LinkedIn. The comments were a tidal wave of condemnation for them and praise for her. They're finished. Serafina is a queen. Their elitism, once a source of pride, had become a permanent public stain. The fear of Serafina's quiet power was a lesson etched into the ashes of their careers. The purge was only the beginning. For Serafina Vance, punishing the guilty was a necessary act, but reforming the system that created them was the true mission. A week later, she convened an emergency meeting of the Apex Global Holdings Board. She stood before them not in the linen shirt of a candidate, but in a simple, elegant navy blazer, her canvas tote resting on the podium. The shirt had served its purpose. Now, it was time to legislate its spirit. The directors, once dismissive of what they called image issues, sat in frozen silence. Their tailored suits, once symbols of their authority, now felt like costumes offering no defense. Serafina presented a dossier detailing a network of 20 other managers linked to the bribery and discrimination scheme. As their names flashed on a screen behind her, security guards quietly entered the room and escorted them out, one by one. The power in the room had irrevocably shifted. You enabled a system that sold trust for cash and valued pedigree over performance. Serafina's voice cut through the tense silence. That ends today. She then unveiled her proposal, a revolutionary new recruitment policy she called the Royce Standard. It was a direct assault on the biases that had nearly consumed her company. From this moment forward, she declared, all applications to Apex will be anonymous. No names, no photos, no university affiliations on the initial review. We will see only skills, experience, and potential. We will judge the work, not the person. Appearance-based evaluations are banned. Blind reviews will be mandatory for all roles, from the mailroom to the executive suite. The press conference that followed sent shockwaves through the financial world. Forbes called it the earthquake in executive recruitment. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page story. Bribery and bias scandal rocks Apex. Chairwoman's revolution begins. Social media erupted. The hashtag #Vance Standard trended globally. People posted before and after memes. One side showing Thorne tearing her resume, the other showing him being led away in disgrace. They mocked her shirt. Now they're unemployed. Serafina's influence extended far beyond the walls of Apex. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, she took the stage, her canvas tote at her side, and challenged a room full of CEOs to adopt blind hiring practices. Her hazel eyes scanned the crowd and landed on a prominent bank executive who had once mocked her consulting work years ago. He visibly trembled as the cameras turned to him. The room's silence was electric. His public apology, tweeted live from the event, was the first of many. The number Elena effect began trending as 50 major firms pledged to review and reform their hiring processes. Back at Apex, the change was palpable. The desks of the purged panel were cleared. Thorne's Man of the Year awards were tossed in the trash. Isolde's collection of designer pens was confiscated. Corbin Dane's framed MBA was found in a recycling bin. Employees watched in awe as Serafina walked the floors, her flat shoes silent, her presence a constant reminder of the new order. This, her calm demeanor seemed to say, is what accountability looks like. The Economist featured her on its cover, a portrait of her in the iconic linen shirt, under the headline, "The Chairwoman's Revolution." She had not just cleaned house, she had rebuilt it on a new foundation. In the years that followed, Apex Global Holdings never fully recovered its old, intimidating sheen, and that was Serafina's greatest victory. Its stock stabilized, but its culture underwent a profound transformation. The Vance Standard became embedded in the company's DNA, systematically rooting out the elitism that had festered for decades. The corporate Instagram, once a curated showcase of Rolexes and private jets, now featured a diverse array of employees, celebrating their achievements and their stories. The grand chandeliers in the lobby still hung, but their light seemed less blinding, softened by a newfound institutional humility. The perpetrators of Serafina's ordeal faded into obscurity. Roderick Thorne and Isolde Finch, facing fraud charges and industry-wide blacklisting, became cautionary tales whispered in junior analyst circles. Corbin Dane's LinkedIn profile remained dormant, a digital ghost of a promising career built on a lie. Brielle Astor and the other hallway tormentors found themselves unemployable in finance, their viral cruelty a permanent stain on their records. Serafina's influence, however, only grew. Her private foundation launched a global initiative, Merit Ascends, training tens of thousands of women and minorities in finance to navigate and dismantle systemic bias. Her workshops were packed, her notebook perpetually filled with new ideas, her canvas tote a constant companion at seminars from London to Tokyo. Her husband, Nathan, a quiet tech billionaire who had built a cybersecurity empire, remained her steadfast supporter, his vast resources entirely at the service of her vision. But the world knew it was her vision that was driving the change. The boardroom where she had been mocked was officially renamed the Vance Conference Center. It served as a permanent reminder that true power was not the ability to intimidate, but the courage to reform. Letters poured in from candidates around the world, sharing stories of how the Vance Standard had given them a fair chance they never would have had otherwise. Serafina read each one, her hazel eyes bright with purpose. One evening, Serafina and Nathan were in their Brooklyn brownstone, a warm, inviting home, filled with books, and the sound of their young daughter's laughter echoing from the garden. She wore a simple linen shirt. He wore jeans. They discussed global strategy over coffee at their kitchen island. Her canvas tote sat on the counter, holding not financial reports, but a new framed photo. Serafina at the press conference, announcing her new policy, her smile radiant and genuine. Their wealth was immense, but their shared mission was greater, rooted in a simple, unshakable belief in fairness. The world knew Serafina Vance now, not as a billionaire's wife or a corporate figurehead, but as a force of nature who had turned personal scorn into systemic change. She didn't gloat, she built. She didn't seek revenge, she sought justice. She had faced down the ugliest parts of a powerful industry and had not been broken by them, but had instead reforged them in her own image. Serafina Vance didn't need a title anymore. She was the standard.